The sprawling Silver Ridge Valley, bathed in the soft hues of dawn, was home to the grand Sterling Estate, a ranch that bred champions. Every inch of the property spoke of luxury and discipline, from the polished white fences to the immaculate stables that housed some of the finest horses in the region. At its helm stood Victor Ashcroft, a man as formidable as the empire he'd built. With his silver-streaked hair and an icy gaze, he ruled the ranch with unrelenting precision, his every word law. That morning, Victor strode across the cobblestone path leading to the stables, his riding crop tapping rhythmically against his palm. Jonas, his loyal assistant, hurried behind him, clutching a clipboard. "Sir, there's news," Jonas began, his voice tinged with anticipation. "Aurora delivered 3 foals last night." Victor halted mid-stride, his sharp eyes narrowing. "3?" he asked, his tone unreadable. Jonas nodded eagerly. "The offspring of Titan and Aurora, a rare blessing." They reached the stable marked with Aurora's name, its interior dimly lit by the pale morning light. Jonas swung the door open, and the smell of fresh hay and damp wood filled the air. Inside, Aurora lay peacefully, her exhausted body curled protectively around her 3 newborns. The foals wobbled unsteadily, their slender legs trembling as they attempted to stand. Victor approached silently, his gaze fixed on the tiny creatures. Their frailty seemed to magnify under his critical scrutiny. Blaze, a chestnut with a delicate star-shaped marking, leaned heavily against Aurora. Willow, darker and timid, nuzzled close to her mother, while Storm, the largest, struggled to balance on his long, unsteady legs. "This is the legacy of Titan and Aurora?" Victor's voice cut through the stillness like a whip. His lip curled into, "Look at their legs. Weak. Their stance. Pitiful. They're useless." "Sir, they're newborns," Jonas interjected cautiously. "With time." "Time," Victor snapped, turning on his heel, "is wasted on the weak. Remove them from the premises immediately." Jonas hesitated, his expression torn. But Victor's glare silenced him. Hours later, under a sky that had turned an ominous gray, the foals were loaded into a rusted trailer. Their frightened whinnies pierced the air as the truck rumbled down the dirt road, leaving the estate behind. Victor watched from a distance, arms crossed. To him, the matter was closed. Yet as the trailer disappeared into the horizon, the wind carried a whisper of fate. These foals were far from finished. The rustling leaves and the soft hum of the evening breeze were the only sounds near Clara Bennett's modest cabin, nestled at the edge of the untamed forest. Surrounded by wildflowers and towering oaks, the cabin was a sanctuary not just for her, but for the animals she rescued. Clara, with her auburn hair tied loosely and boots muddied from a long day's work, was tending to her garden when an unfamiliar sound broke the calm, the low rumble of an engine. Frowning, she set down her tools and moved toward the dirt road, her curiosity piqued. Few vehicles ventured this far into the wilderness. Hiding behind a cluster of bushes, she watched as a battered truck pulled to a stop. 2 men stepped out, their movements brisk and hurried. Clara's breath caught as they opened the trailer and began unloading 3 frail, trembling foals. "Why leave them here?" one man asked, his voice uneasy. "The boss doesn't want them," the other replied coldly. "Said they were worthless." Clara's chest tightened as she watched the foals stagger on unsteady legs, their soft whinnies laced with fear. The smallest, a chestnut with a star-shaped marking on its forehead, collapsed into the dirt, too weak to stand. "This isn't right," the first man muttered, glancing nervously at the field. "Not our problem," the other snapped, climbing back into the truck. Moments later, the vehicle sped away, leaving the foals shivering in the open field. Clara stepped out from her hiding place, her heart breaking at the sight. As she approached slowly, the foals flinched, their wide eyes filled with terror. Hey, it's okay," Clara murmured, kneeling a few steps away. She reached out a hand, her voice gentle. "I'm here to help you." The chestnut foal, the smallest, hesitated before sniffing her hand. Clara smiled softly, her touch as light as a whisper as she stroked its fragile head. "You're safe now." Determined, she gathered them one by one, her arms aching as she guided them toward her cabin. By the time she reached the barn, she was exhausted, but she worked tirelessly to make them comfortable. Blankets were spread, warm milk prepared from what little she had. As the foals huddled together under her care, Clara whispered, "I don't know who abandoned you, but I promise you this, you'll never be alone again." The first few nights were the hardest. The foals' faint whinnies broke the stillness of Clara's modest barn, their fragile bodies trembling even under the layers of blankets she'd wrapped around them. Clara stayed by their side, her hands gently stroking their coats, whispering soft reassurances until exhaustion finally claimed her. Blaze, the chestnut with the star-shaped marking, clung to Clara's every move, his wide eyes watching her as if she were the only safe harbor in a sea of uncertainty. Storm, the silver-gray colt, seemed to be the strongest, but struggled to stand on his long legs. Willow, dark and timid, stayed close to her siblings, her head resting against Blaze for comfort. "They'll need everything I've got," Clara murmured to herself one morning, leaning against the barn door. She had saved animals before, but these foals were different. They were so vulnerable, so utterly reliant on her care. And though her resources were modest, her resolve was unwavering. Each day became a routine of nurturing. Clara rose with the dawn, preparing warm milk in makeshift bottles and massaging the foals' legs to encourage strength. She spent hours repairing her old barn, ensuring the foals had a safe and warm shelter. When they grew strong enough, she guided them into the small corral she had built, letting them feel the earth beneath their hooves. Blaze, despite being the smallest, showed an eagerness that tugged at Clara's heart. He followed her everywhere, his delicate steps filled with curiosity. Storm began testing his strength, trotting short distances before collapsing into the straw with a defiant snort. Willow, always cautious, stayed in the background, but her soulful gaze spoke of quiet bravery. Weeks turned into months, and Clara watched with pride as the foals transformed. Their once frail bodies began to fill out, muscles forming beneath their coats. Blaze's energy became boundless, Storm's strides grew more confident, and even Willow began exploring the corral with hesitant steps. "You're getting there," Clara whispered one afternoon, leaning on the fence as she watched them play. "One day, the world will see how incredible you are." She knew the journey ahead would be long, but for the first time, hope glimmered like the soft light of dawn. The foals, once discarded, were no longer victims of abandonment. They were survivors, proof of what love and care could accomplish, and Clara vowed to see them through every step of the way. Years passed in Silveridge Valley, and under Clara's care, the three foals blossomed into magnificent horses. Blaze, now a striking chestnut stallion, retained his fiery spirit, his star-shaped marking gleaming like a badge of honor. Storm, with his silver-gray coat and powerful build, carried an air of unshakable confidence. Willow, once timid, had grown into a graceful mare, her movements fluid and serene. Their bond with Clara had deepened, built on years of trust, patience, and love. One crisp autumn morning, as Clara brushed Blaze's coat in the stable, a stranger approached her modest ranch. The man was tall, dressed in a sharp suit that seemed out of place against the rustic backdrop. His polished boots crunched on the gravel as he reached the gate, tipping his hat. "Miss Bennet?" he asked. Clara stepped forward, her hand still resting on Blaze's neck. "That's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Matthew Greaves," the man said with a warm smile. "I represent the Ridgefield Derby. We've heard about your horses, and we'd like to formally invite you to compete in this year's event." Clara blinked in surprise. The Ridgefield Derby was one of the most prestigious equestrian competitions in the region, attracting the finest horses and riders. It was a stage for legends, not for a humble trainer with a small rescue ranch. I don't run a professional stable," she said hesitantly. My horses. Your horses have made quite the impression, Matthew interrupted, glancing toward the corral where Storm and Willow grazed. We believe they have what it takes to compete and win. Clara's heart raced. Competing in the Derby would be a chance to prove the worth of Blaze, Storm, and Willow to the world. But it also meant stepping into a world of pedigree and wealth, a far cry from the humble beginnings of her horses. After a moment of thought, she nodded. We'll do it. The weeks leading up to the Derby were grueling. Clara poured every ounce of her energy into training. Blaze's speed was honed to perfection. Storm's power was refined for challenging obstacles, and Willow's elegance was sharpened into precise movements. Clara knew this wasn't just a competition. It was a battle to prove that resilience and love could triumph over arrogance and abandonment. As the day of the Derby approached, Clara stood in the corral, watching her horses gallop through the morning mist. This is your moment, she whispered, her voice steady with determination. Let's show them what we're made of. The Ridgefield Derby was alive with energy, the air humming with the anticipation of greatness. The sprawling arena, nestled in the heart of the valley, was a grand display of wealth and tradition. Banners fluttered in the crisp morning breeze as the crowd packed the stands, eager to witness the finest horses and trainers in the region. Clara arrived early, leading Blaze, Storm, and Willow into the competitors' stables. Despite their polished coats and confident strides, they drew skeptical glances from the other trainers. The rumors had spread. Her horses were rescues, once discarded as worthless. In a world of pedigrees and prestige, they were outsiders. Clara felt the weight of those stares, but kept her focus. She had come to prove a point. Greatness wasn't born of privilege. It was forged through love and determination. As she prepared Blaze for the first event, a familiar voice made her pause. What are you doing here? Clara turned to find Victor Ashcroft standing a few feet away, his expression a mixture of disbelief and disdain. He was flanked by his prized black stallion, a creature bred for perfection. She met his gaze calmly. Competing. Victor's lips curled into a sneer as he glanced at Blaze. With them, those rejects, you must be desperate. Clara straightened, her voice firm. They're not rejects, they're survivors, and today they'll show you what that means. Victor laughed coldly. We'll see. The first event was a test of speed, and Blaze was up. As the signal blared, the chestnut stallion surged forward, his powerful strides eating up the track. The crowd gasped as he passed horse after horse, his movements fluid and determined. By the final stretch, Blaze crossed the finish line with a triumphant burst, securing first place. Next came the strength challenge, where Storm tackled a grueling obstacle course. His sheer power and precision left the audience in awe as he cleared barriers with effortless grace. Finally, it was Willow's turn to shine in the elegance event. Her flawless performance, a dance of precision and poise, drew gasps and spontaneous applause. By the end of the day, Clara's horses had become the talk of the Derby. As she returned them to the stables, she felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest. They weren't just holding their own. They were excelling. Victor stood in the shadows, his gaze dark as he watched the crowd shower Clara and her horses with admiration. For the first time, his air of superiority faltered. The final challenge loomed, a synchronized performance that would determine the Derby's champion. As Clara tended to her horses that evening, she whispered, Tomorrow, we show them everything. We prove that second chances are worth believing in. Blaze, Storm, and Willow nuzzled her hands, their trust unshakable. Together, they had already won the hearts of many. Now, they aimed to conquer the Derby. The morning of the final challenge dawned with a golden glow spreading over the Ridgefield Derby grounds. Spectators filled the stands, their cheers and whispers creating an electric atmosphere. The final event, a synchronized performance, was designed to test not just speed and strength, but the connection between horses and their handler. It would demand unity, precision, and an unbreakable bond. Clara stood at the edge of the arena, her heart steady as she prepared Blaze, Storm, and Willow. Each of them bore the markings of their journey, muscles honed by tireless training, eyes that shone with intelligence and trust. This was their moment, not just to win, but to show the world what they were capable of. The announcer's voice echoed across the arena. Next, representing Silver Ridge Valley, we have Clara Bennett with Blaze, Storm, and Willow. Clara led the three into the arena, their sleek coats gleaming in the sunlight. The crowd fell silent, anticipation thick in the air. Blaze trotted at her side, his movements vibrant with energy. Storm followed with powerful strides, while Willow, graceful and serene, completed the trio. They were a vision of unity, a living testament to resilience and love. The performance began with a signal from Clara. Blaze darted forward, his strides confident as he cleared the first jump. Storm followed, his power evident as he tackled a sharp turn with ease. Willow brought up the rear, her movements so fluid they seemed almost effortless. Together, they moved like a symphony, each stride, leap, and turn perfectly synchronized. As they approached the final stretch, the challenge grew steeper, a towering jump that required all three horses to leap simultaneously. Clara's pulse quickened as she gave the command. Now, Blaze surged ahead, his powerful body launching into the air. Storm followed, his sheer strength carrying him effortlessly. Willow leaped last, her elegance completing the trio's flawless flight. They landed as one, their hooves striking the ground in perfect harmony. The crowd erupted into cheers, the sound deafening. In the judge's booth, the head judge rose to his feet, clapping enthusiastically. The other competitors exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence shaken. Victor Ashcroft stood in the shadows, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. For the first time, he was witnessing what he had so easily discarded. When the results were announced, Clara stood at the center of the arena, her heart pounding as the announcer declared, "This year's Ridgefield Derby champion is Clara Bennett and her team, Blaze, Storm, and Willow." The crowd roared as Clara embraced her horses, tears streaming down her face. Blaze nuzzled her shoulder, Storm snorted proudly, and Willow whinnied softly, their bond shining brighter than the trophy in her hands. Victor approached her, his expression tight. "Those horses, they were mine. I want them back. Name your price." Clara's eyes hardened as she looked at him. "They were never yours, Victor. You abandoned them. They're family now, and family isn't for sale." Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He turned and walked away, his once unshakable arrogance diminished. As Clara stood with her horses, the crowd's cheers washing over them, she whispered, "This victory is ours, not because of where we came from, but because of how far we've come." The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the arena. Clara, Blaze, Storm, and Willow had done more than win the Derby. They had redefined what it meant to be champions. As the sun set over the Ridgefield Derby grounds, the golden glow of victory still lingered in Clara's heart. The crowd had long since dispersed, and the once bustling arena was now a quiet expanse, illuminated only by the stars above. Clara stood in the stables, her hands gently brushing Blaze's mane. Storm and Willow rested nearby, their steady breaths filling the tranquil air. "You did it," Clara whispered, her voice soft but filled with pride. "You proved to everyone what I've always known, that you're extraordinary." Blaze nuzzled her shoulder, his star-shaped marking catching the faint light of the stable lantern. Storm let out a low snort of approval, while Willow tilted her head toward Clara, her calm presence a comforting reminder of how far they had come. As Clara finished tending to them, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Clara?" Turning, she saw Matthew Greaves, the Derby representative, approaching with an excited grin. "I had to catch you before you left," he said, his tone brimming with anticipation. What you and your horses accomplished today wasn't just remarkable. It was revolutionary. Clara smiled, still basking in the day's triumph. Thank you. It's been an incredible journey. Matthew nodded, then leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. I have an opportunity for you. An invitation, actually. There's an international competition in France, the Grand Écuyer Championship. It's the pinnacle of equestrian events, featuring the best teams from around the world. After what I've seen today, I believe you and your horses belong there. Clara's breath caught. France. The very idea seemed both exhilarating and daunting. Competing on an international stage wasn't something she had ever imagined. Her gaze shifted to Blaze, Storm, and Willow, who now stood quietly, their presence as steady as the trust they built together. It's a big decision, she murmured, more to herself than Matthew. Matthew smiled gently. Take your time, but know this, you've already inspired so many here. Imagine what you could do on a global stage. As he left, Clara leaned against the stable door, her thoughts swirling. Competing in France would mean stepping into an entirely new world, one that demanded more than ever before. But as she watched her horses, their strength and resilience evident in every line of their powerful forms, a spark of determination began to burn. By the time the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Clara had made her decision. Standing in the corral, with Blaze, Storm, and Willow surrounding her, she whispered, We've overcome so much together. This is just another challenge. Let's show the world what we're made of. Blaze lifted his head, his eyes bright with understanding. Storm stamped his hoof, as if in agreement, while Willow let out a soft nicker of encouragement. They were ready, and so was she. The journey to France would be long and filled with new trials, but Clara knew one thing for certain. No matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about rising to greatness, proving to the world that love, perseverance, and second chances could create champions. As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light over the valley, Clara stood tall beside her horses, her heart full of hope and resolve. Together, they looked toward the horizon, ready to embrace the new chapter awaiting them. Their story was far from over. It was only just beginning. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our latest videos. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thank you all for taking the time to watch, and see you in the next video.